Hello, my name is Deb, which I hope you know by now. I took this course for two primary reasons. First, I believed that it would force me to face challenging and profound questions, which in turn would cause me to have an existential crisis by the age of 18. This is the aspiration of all teenagers. Secondly, I wanted a structured opportunity to discover myself and better myself. This is done through truly expanding the mind and being relentless in pursuing answers that will help identify your place in the world. I believe philosophy is the perfect venue for just that. We truly began the course when we delved into the fundamental nature of human beings. That's when I came to realize that this would be a challenging and rewarding subject of study. The topic of human nature is complex, and perhaps the answer to which one arrives is more indicative of one's own nature. So let's begin. It was hard to comprehend and moreover communicate or coherently conclude exactly what I believe. The textbook outlined two theories that I felt most attracted to, and that guided me in developing my views. The first of these is through the context of Darwin's theory of evolution. In the 1800s, Darwin proposed that organisms go through changes and diversify from common ancestors over time, and this is thought to be done through the mechanism of natural selection. Natural selection is the process in which living things with optimal traits produce more offspring than others, which in turn causes the changes in species over time. The theory of evolution explores the idea of the struggle for existence. The textbook outlines the life of a cat, from birth, at which point it fights to get milk from its mother, to when the cat must compete with other cats for food and mates, to the rest of its life where it must continue its struggle against predators and the events of nature. The cat lives fighting to continue living, and certain genetic variations can give this cat an advantage in survival. Organisms with these advantages are able to survive longer, find more mates, spread their genes, and allow for more organisms to exist with these genetic advantages. The pivotal point to this is the need to exist. As humans, we are not exempt from a fundamental desire to live, and I believe it is what defines the very core of our nature. Evolution can assist in explaining basic and shared human experiences. It can explain basic things, such as hunger or lust, but it can also potentially explain more complex concepts like social competitiveness, empathy, compassion, and gratitude. In the end, all the facets of human nature derived from the theory of evolution are understood as assumptions. Unlike biological evolution, these assumptions are not facts, and I do not think the theory of evolution speaks for the purpose of human existence. It also carries flaws. Like if our main goal is simply survival and furthering our genetics, then why do some people choose not to reproduce? Why do we participate in health-damaging activities such as smoking or drinking? And if evolution does not explain why we want to survive, but simply that we do, then it appears to be an incomplete thought. The second theory from which I adopted ideas for the nature of human beings is the traditional rationalist view, largely inspired and developed by Plato. This view is sometimes seen in direct competition with evolution, but I admire ideas from both. Plato's theory suggests that there are three distinct parts of human nature. 1. Appetite dictates such things as hunger, thirst, or other physical desires. Aggression is responsible for warring instincts such as anger and frustration. The third one, which is considered the most important aspect, is reason. Reason is able to control the other two and differentiates humans from the rest of the animal kingdom. Therefore, at the core, humans are rational creatures. The evidence of our rationality exists in the entirety of our civilization, from homes to hospitals to abstract concepts such as time. Thus, the essence of human nature from my perspective is the desire to survive and the quality of being logical creatures. In my opinion, the two are closely related. This does suggest, however, that I believe the fundamental nature of humans is to be selfish. We assert and further our self-interests. I don't necessarily see this as a completely negative thing, and I do believe that even selfishness can incite positive behavior towards others, and it still allows for the existence of a nurturing and cohesive human environment. Rather than focusing on the nature of reality, I would like to focus on the nature of God. This topic is incredibly fascinating to me, as the conversation of God has been something I've struggled with my entire life, growing up as a Hindu who did not fully accept all the Hindu ideals. First, I'd like to contemplate the existence of a God. There are once again two theories I gravitate towards the most. The first is the design theory. William Paley popularized the argument through the analogy of a watch. If we were to see a watch in the middle of a forest, we would not assume it simply appeared there. We would notice the complexities of the watch and the various systems that come together in order to allow the watch to perform a specific task, and we would then conclude that an intelligent being must have designed the watch. The same concept can be applied to our universe. If we observe the intricacies of our existence, we could infer that an intelligent being may have had a hand in our own creation. Paley used various arguments from science, primarily biology, to argue this theory. For example, we can understand that various components of human anatomy work together as a cohesive system in order to allow us to exist. My interest in the design argument may seem in direct conflict with my aforementioned belief in evolution. However, I do not think it does. I don't necessarily believe that the variations involved in evolution are completely by chance. In fact, the seemingly existent natural algorithm that determines characteristics of an organism seems to support the design argument. As philosophers have argued before, natural selection may simply be a mechanism driven by a divine agent. To me, the most convincing argument that supports the theory is the observance of the physical laws that govern our universe. They seem to have been designed specifically in order to ensure our existence. If the force of gravity had been a fraction stronger or weaker, galaxies, stars, and planets would not have formed. If the universe were expanding just slightly more slowly, galaxies would have collapsed into black holes. The fact that there is an incredibly small threshold under which life is allowed to exist, and that vastly complex laws fall into this threshold, suggests that it is more likely it is the result of a creator than pure chance. What would truly challenge intelligent design to me is if there was sufficient proof of the multiverse theory. In this case, the perfect conditions of our universe becomes an inevitable result, with an infinite number of universes and a finite number of materials. When we come to the actual nature of God, I believe the argument falls a little short. While I believe the design theory is a fantastic way to lay the foundation for the existence of God, I think that this is where its primary function ends. From here, we become incredibly subjective. Going back to the analogy of the watch, we understand that the watch was created with a purpose, so it follows that we, as humans who were created, have a purpose too. However, I believe the strength of the design argument lies in the fact that it is based on logic and deduction, and it is heavily rooted in the observation of governing laws. The same cannot be applied when it comes to the purpose or the true nature of God. We can say that because God created us, God must be loving and nurturing. Alternatively, we could say that because God created us, God is calculating and experimentative. This is purely based on one's own perspective, so I don't believe the argument goes towards addressing God's intention or characteristics. It is also not necessary to add the characteristics of a traditional Christian or Catholic God or any God from a specific religion, and God is a term used as it is familiar. Once again, I believe the design argument best serves its purpose by allowing the conversation of God's existence, simply his existence, and the more detailed issues of specific faith comes in after. This is where the second view I subscribe to, agnosticism, comes in. Agnostics believe that God's existence cannot be definitively proven or disproven. This, to me, not only applies to the existence, but more importantly to the nature, personal characteristics, and desires of an ultimate being. I don't think it is likely we will ever uncover uncontested proof of either God existing or not, and I don't think it's likely we will discover the more intimate details of a supposed God. In turn, I am able to live my practical day-to-day life as if there is no God, despite the fact that I do believe there is inviting evidence to show otherwise. As there is nothing to suggest a specific God, I do not have to comply with the traditions or beliefs of a specific faith group. The entirety of this does not undermine our pursuits to discover the ultimate truth, however, because I believe along the way we uncover other things instead, things that further our own advancement as well as the advancement of our species. Perhaps my favorite topic covered in class was the last. Ethics is incredibly engrossing not only because of the everyday application of it, but also because it is vastly intricate and complex. I primarily subscribe to the consequentialist view of ethics, in which the consequences of an action determines its moral correctness. Under it, I take ideas from utilitarianism, or more specifically, rule utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism is the ethical stance that an action is moral if it complies with rules that produce happiness for the greatest number of people. It draws on observations of general human behavior to develop rules that maximize utility. Rule utilitarianism falls in line with my view of human nature, both with humans being rational creatures and humans being driven by the desire to continue on in existence. Ethics, in my opinion, is encouraged by the selfish nature of humans in which we recognize its vitality to the continued functionality of our society, and through logic and reasoning, we are able to determine what actions would harm the systems in which we exist. although I generally operate under the idea that the results of an action, its impact on yourself, others, and the larger human system determines the ethical nature of an action, I recognize that even determining the quality of the consequence can be relative. Thus, we must draw on our own experiences and influences to determine the morality of some circumstances. I often emphasize the idea that morality is not black and white. It is a complex conversation with various shades of gray. I also don't believe ethics, beyond the fundamental rules that see little variation, are static. The world changes, we change, and with it, so do our ideals of what is right and wrong. It is essential that we move forward with an open and eager mind. After defining my outlook on three integral aspects of philosophy, I can now observe how the three come together to formulate one basic view in which I see the future of humanity. One of the first ideas we discussed in this class was Plato's allegory of the cave, and how it applies even today. It can be argued that we chain ourselves to a metaphorical cave of ignorance through a variety of means. The question remains of whether or not we, as a species in its entirety, can make the conscious decision to come out of the cave and into enlightenment. I would primarily think that no, we cannot. I think the reason we are in this cave far outweighs an inclination to leave. By this, I mean that following with the view that the fundamental nature of humans is selfish, I think we find too much comfort in ignorance to embrace the more difficult path. In addition to this, I am uncertain if we can truly define or determine true enlightenment or the ultimate truth. I am not completely sure if we can conclude what exactly out of the cave truly means. Despite this, I believe that happiness can be achieved simply because true happiness has a multitude of definitions, and if an individual determines they comply with their own explanation of what is true happiness, then they have found it. I believe a lot is ultimately possible because of the subjective nature of human existence. Unfortunately, I also believe humanity is headed for inevitable doom. Looking at prevalent issues today, it seems we are a species destined for a destructive end. Let's focus on the issue of climate change. It is a direct result of human interference. We have destroyed ecosystems, depleted resources, and have made a significant carbon footprint on the planet we call home. These actions seem to go against our core desire to live and our unique function of reason. Rather, we are interested in comfort, luxury, and immediate gratification. Perhaps one may say that my outlook on life supports these actions, as I believe in the innate selfishness of our species. However, I disagree. Once again, our human nature is to survive, and selfishness is an accessory to our survival, so destroying the planet in which we exist conflicts with that goal. We are distinguished by our advanced ability to reason, yet there is no logic in not pursuing a sustainable future. Consequentialist ethics would dictate that the effects of not taking care of our planet are negative, and therefore the actions that go into climate change are immoral. Despite this, I am not convinced that we will abandon our destructive tendencies, but rather we will drive ourselves to our end. I am also aware that the ideas discussed in this video may not reflect the sentiments I hold in the future. In fact, I am excited to look back on this video in 10 years and compare my two selves. As of now, this reflects how I see the world, and what I am comfortable with believing. Perhaps my strongest belief was solidified by philosophy, in which all that we truly know, is that we know nothing. I am comfortable in uncertainty, as it constantly gives me hope for improvement in the future.